Okay, so we are doing Unit 11, Lesson 4, and it's got happy little otters on the front. Basically, it's about base change, watching out for like the little tricks like extraneous and missing solutions. So this one is pretty straightforward. It's just about multiplying fractions and then simplifying it down, and you'll get an answer. Your answer is like 32. I'm not saying that's right, but something like that. Find it, simplify it, compare it to the kid sitting next to you. I'll pause for a second while you give that one a shot. Okay, so you should have said that 1/3 times 9 over 2, pay attention now, gives you 1/3 times 9 over 2. I like to factor things. Remember that? If you can factor it, you should. Gentlemen in the back, focus. Can't afford to. Oh, and that phone goes up on my desk. All right, so right now, I'd just like you to get that, here, I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, so we're multiplying this out, and if you can factor it, you should. The 9 can factor into 3 times 3. Now, I know some of you just like did it a different way, but I want you to think about how I've told you. If you can factor it, you should. It allows that to cancel, and then the answer is just 3 over 2. So now it's 4 to the 3 over 2 equals x. And we learned how to do those yesterday, actually 2 days ago. Square root of 4 is 2, and then the 2 gets put to the third. 2 to the third is 8. There is your answer. Good question. Did I ever take the square root on both sides? No. And this is important to know the difference. This problem has a square root in it. Does it have 2 answers? No. If it has a squared in it and you solve it by taking the square root on both sides, then you need 2 answers. Not just because there's a square root in it, but because you do a square root to both sides. That's what makes the square root come in. So I didn't ever do that on this problem. This problem just had a square root in it in the first place. So it does not need a plus and minus. All right, so let's move on to the next one. That one. Would you please solve? Do something to both sides. Get your answer. I'm going to pause for a second. Let you try that one. Okay. You should have put this to the 3 halves, put this to the 3 halves, and then what happens? Agreed. Final answer, x equals square root of 64 is 8 to the third is 512. I know that's kind of complicated, but 8 to the third was your final answer. But is it plus or minus or not? Yes, it is. How many of you remembered the plus and minus at least? Okay, good. I know you might not have known that it was 512, but at least you should have known it was the square root of 64, which is 8, and then 8 to the third. And 8 to the third happens to be 512. Okay, any questions on that one? I know I would not expect you to have memorized 8 to the third. But the thing I'd be worried about is you forgetting the plus and minus. So as long as most of you remembered that, we're good. Okay, this one. Get the clump alone first. That's the clump. Get the clump alone. One of my favorites. Right up there with can factor. You should. Solve this one. You should get an answer or maybe 2. Kind of depends on what you do, right? And then compare it with the kid next to you, and let's see how many people can get this one right.
First, we're going to make sure we add 8 to both sides.
I like it. And then you get 8 plus 8 is 16. Hold on just a second. Let me catch up. Okay, now what?
Then we're going to cancel out 2 and 3.
Okay, how are you going to do that?
Multiply by 2 over 3 or exponent.
3 over 2. Okay, good. And this cancels. And then x equals. Should I? Okay, keep going. Keep going.
Find the square root of 16.
I like it. And that's 4. And then what?
4 to the power 3.
Does anybody have that one? 4 to the power of 3. 64. Is that it?
You need the plus and minus
because why?
Because the absolute value of x.
Yes. And what did we do to it that made this have to be absolute value? Very good. That's an even number on the bottom, and therefore a plus and minus has to come in, and therefore it's plus and minus 64. Nicely done. Any other questions on that one? Okay, let's move on to the next one. This one is a true exponential. The other ones had exponents, but this one's an exponential. Let me make sure you get the difference. Exponentials have an x in the exponent. Let's look back at the last one. Do you get that the exponent didn't have an x in it? This is more complicated because the x is in the exponent. The only way to do this is to make the what's the what. Make the bases the same. Very good. Okay? Do that. Make the bases the same. Actually, a lot of people think you have to use 2 as the base. 2 is a good base, and it would work in this problem. But you could actually use 4 as your base. You could change both of these into 4s. You could use 1 over 16 as your base. Kind of weird, but you could, as long as you make both of them into that. So if you're a more advanced student, I bet you could challenge yourself by using the base of 1/4. But you don't have to do that. 2 is a nice, easy base. Okay. Usually when the chatting gets going, it usually means people are done, and that's okay. All right, Miss M, would you tell me what to do to start? Okay, so you changed which one? This one? This one. This one to 32 over 16. Let me just think about that for a second. 32 over 16 is definitely true. That is 32 over 16 is 2. Nothing wrong with what you just did. It looks to me like you're trying to do this using 16ths as a base, which I gave you as a challenge. So that's awesome. But you're doing it a hard way. So can you finish it? No. That's not where you go from there. Okay. Now, if you're going to try to make 1/16 as your base, you're actually getting kind of close. But that's the advanced way that most people are not going to be able to handle. How about we just do it with 2 as the base? Okay? So let me ask you this. If I had to make this into 2 to the something, I want you to think on it for just a minute. 2 to the 4x is equal to 2 to the what? 2 to the what makes 1/16. How about this? How do you just make a 2 into a 16? To the power of. 2 to the power of 4 makes 16. Just think about that for a second. Do you get that why that makes 16? But I want it to be 1/16. There you go. Now that we made the bases the same, that has to equal that. So divide by 4, x equals -1. Who got -1 for their answer? Ooh, more than half of you. Good job. Okay, this one. This one's harder because it asks you to solve for x in terms of y. I want you to think about that for a second. Solve for x. What does solve for x mean? Get x alone. Good. If you're going to get x alone, you won't just get an answer like 12. What'll it have in the answer? Yes, it'll have x equals. But what I mean is, over the answer over here, there'll be a y in that. Solve it like this. So x is alone, and it equals blah, blah, blah. He'll have a y in there somewhere. Okay? Solve it for x. This is more of a challenge. I want to give you a moment. Think it through. There's some simplifying you could do. Just get it simplified first. Your homework will be like this. But this is like with the problems you did the other day. Just act like it's one of those and ignore the 1 over there until you're done. Once this is all simplified down, then try to get the x alone. I'll pause for a second. If you can do nothing else, simplify what I circled. So on this one, it's more complicated because you got to do all the simplifying first. But if you can factor it, you should. And this 8 can be factored into 4 times 2, and that makes this 4 cancel that 4. Or you could just reduce the 4/8 to 1/2. Do you get how that I just did with a little green pen there that turns it all to 1/2? Okay, so then I've simplified it, and I got a 1 here and a 2 here. Do I really need the 1 on top? Not unless there's nothing else on top. But there's going to be some other stuff on top because these aren't happy where they are. Remember me saying that if it has an exponent that's negative, it's not happy where it is, and you're going to move it to the other side. So these go up and join those guys. Okay, and that becomes x to the 5th. Here's another way to do it. Some of you are going to like this better. 3, and you subtract -2. What's 3 minus -2? +5. That's why it's x to the 5th. Okay, and then the y has nothing else to like cancel or do anything with it, so it just stays down here like that. There we go. And that equals 1. Am I done? No, because x isn't alone yet. So take it from there. How do we get x alone now? All right. You could accept. I know on your own paper you probably didn't reduce it yet, but go ahead. Multiply by. Excellent. What do I have after this stuff cancels? Mm-hmm. Yep. And then is x alone yet? A lot of people get stumped right here, like, I don't know how to get x alone. Well, the only thing that's making it not alone is the 5 there. So you really just got to get rid of the 5. So how do you get rid of the 5? Not times it by, put it to the power of 1/5. We're not timesing it by anything. We're putting it to the power of 1/5. Now, I just took a root on both sides, but it's an odd root, so I don't need plus and minus. If those had been even numbers, I'd need a plus or minus. X equals that. And do you have to simplify that? No. A lot of people get confused by that. But why am I not doing this? Because I don't know what the 5th root of 2 is. So I don't know what to put for it. So I just leave it that way. Unless you know what the 5th root of 2 is, it's some weird decimal like 1.1372. Okay? But you aren't expected to know that. So you could leave it just like this. Okay. Any questions on that one? I know it's a little weird, but is x alone? And does it have a y in the answer? That's what it said. Solve for x in terms of y, meaning there'll be a y in the answer. Okay, so don't be surprised. Now you've gotten to the place where now sometimes your answers that you get don't work. Do you remember yesterday I told you about the finger that the guy had that he would flip around, it doesn't work? You get extraneous answers now where you have an answer and it's an answer, but it doesn't work. You also get answers that have variables in them like we just did. Sometimes the right answer is that there is no answer. So you're getting to be more complicated, and that's good. It means you're growing up. When you're in elementary school, they don't try to mess with things like there's no solution. Kids are like, what do you mean there's no solution? That's too confusing, okay? You guys can handle it now when there's more than one answer, or when the answer that you get doesn't actually work, or when there's like a plus and minus on your answer. So those are the things you got to watch out for on your next test. Your answers aren't as simple anymore as just the answer is 3. Sometimes it's just like we just had. The answer was 2y to the 1/5. Okay, yes?
Is there a way to know that it's like extraneous? Like, how would you, if you just like did it wrong and then it doesn't work and you...
The only way you can know is by taking the answer you got. Like a lot of times the answer is like -4, and you stick it in the original problem and see if it works. We're going to get to one in a minute. I'll show you another one where there's no answer for it. You get the answer, but the answer doesn't work. So that's called an extraneous answer. All right, try this one. It's just like the last one, where you simplify it down and they want x alone, and it's okay to have a y in it, in the answer. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second while you give that one a try. Let's see what you think this one came up to is a little bit different. Would you agree that those can go together and make 2x squared? Would you agree that on the bottom, the y's can go together and make 9y to the 8th? All right, now, is x alone yet? No, because that's the goal. Remember, that's the goal. Try to get x alone. So now I'm going to multiply by 9y to the 8th on both sides. Why did I do that? So that this would cancel and I get closer to x being alone. And now this is not 29. What is that? 2 times 9, which is 18. Good. So 2x squared equals 18y to the 8th. And this is heavy-duty algebra here. All right, next. You're going to be getting x alone, so divide by 2, divide by 2, cancels. 18 divided by 2 is what? So this is x squared equals 9y to the 8th. Now, x is almost alone. What do I got to do? Don't say times it by. To the power of 1/2. Excellent. And now the real hardcore math students can get this next part right because they'll remember that what? Plus and minus. How many of you remembered plus and minus? Oh, it's so easy to forget, isn't it? That is an even root, plus and minus. And the next part is 1/2 gets put on this and this. So what's 9 to the 1/2? 3. Awesome. And then y to the 8th has to be put to the 1/2, and these get multiplied, and then becomes y to the 4th. There is your final answer. That was a tough one. I'm guessing only half the kids got it. Who were those half or less? More than half. Cool. All right, questions? Yes, in the back. Okay, so you just did it a different way. As long as you got the same answer, I'm fine with. There's lots of like the order that you do things in doesn't always have to be the same exact thing as what I do. So I'm happy you found another way. Yes. How I got the y to the 4th. Okay. Were you with me up to where it was red, like right there before I started the blue ink? Were you with me up to there? Okay. So then from here, all I got to do is the square root. I can do it this way if that would help. That's what square root is like. Square root of x squared is absolute value of x, which is why it causes us to get a plus and minus answer. And the square root of 9 is 3. And the square root of y to the 8th, that gets a little weird. Okay, square root of y to the 8th, I really need to look at what it really means. Square root means power of 1/2. And then when you go 8 times the half, half of 8 is 4, or 8 times a half is 4. I'll blow this part up for you. 8 over 1 times 1 over 2, and then if you can factor, you should. 2 times 4, 2's cancel. 4 times 1 is 4 over 1, which is 4. That's why it's y to the 4th. And why does it get a plus and minus? Because this was absolute value. Does that help at all? Okay, good. All right, so let's go to another one. This one's weird because of the notation. It's the same as all the other problems, it's just we wrote it differently. Can you figure out how to fix it? I'm going to pause for a second while you try that one. Did you notice on this problem that it was really just x to the 1/4, except it was written a different way? In case you didn't catch that, that's what that means. Now I need to put it to the 4th. And this becomes x equals 2 to the 4th, which is 16. Who had 16? A lot of you. Good job. Okay, this next one. Get the clump alone. Get the clump alone. Give it a try. I'll pause. We try that one. All right. So we're starting by subtracting 2 from both sides. -2, -2. And this becomes -1 on that side. Then I take the cube of both sides, putting it to the 3rd power. Why? Because that's the 3rd root, like 1/3, and this is the reciprocal of that. So they'll cancel. X minus 2 equals -1 to the 3rd means -1 times -1 times -1, which is -1. And you get how it's so easy from there? It's like a super simple problem you've done since like 5th grade. Add 2 to both sides. X equals -1 plus 2 is +1. Now, we've got to make sure this actually works. Okay, so how do I know if it actually works? This is important. Remember the extraneous thing yesterday? Because it has a square root in it, I'm going to be extra careful on this one, just to make sure that this actually is true. I'm saying 1 is the answer, so let's put in a 1. Do you get I have 1 minus 2 makes -1? Is this a problem? Oh, if it had been a square root, it would have been a problem. But since it's a cube root, it's not a problem. So this one does work. It would have been very tempting to look at this and go, oh, it's underneath the square root. No, it's not. It's underneath the cube root. So it's okay. Cube root of -1 is what times what times what makes -1? And the answer is -1. -1 plus 2 is 1, and it actually worked. So this worked, and I don't cross it off. Yes, sir. Yes, if it had been a 4th root or a 6th root or a 2nd root, square root, any even number, it would have crashed right there. So that's why we were checking that. All right, on to the next one. This one is simpler than the others, and yet a lot of people don't know what to do. Let's see if you know what to do. There's really only one step, and if you do it right, boom, you have the answer. I'll pause for a second while you try. So let's settle the arguments. I got some people who think it's this, some people think it's that. Would you agree that I can multiply both sides by 2 to the 8th? I'm going to do that. Wait. Just one thing at a time. Would you agree I'm multiplying by 2 to the 8th on both sides? Is that okay? All right, so then this cancels this because they are the same, right? Can't argue with that. 2 to the x is equal to, now what's that? That is not 4 to the 9th. Here's the thing. Some of you guys are trying to go 2 times 2. Do you know why you cannot do that? Because there's exponents come before multiply. So you got a 2 to the 1 here that's being times by a 2 to the 8th. What does that make? 2 to the 9th. Anything that you can you argue with that? Do you think? Yes? All I did on the left was multiply by 2 to the 8th on both sides. You actually can do that, but your life will be much more complicated. But you still have a 2 to the 8th on the bottom. You know what I mean? You can't like cancel this one without canceling that one too. All right. So one thing at a time. If you think I'm wrong, we'll know it at the end because when I stick this number in that I get, it'll either work or it won't. So do you get if the bases are the same, then the x has to equal the 9? So I'm saying x is 9. Now, prove me wrong. We'll actually stick it in here and see if this is right. So if I say x is 9, I'm going to stick in a 9 here. You go 2 to the 9th divided by 2 to the 8th. You subtract these two. What's 9 minus 8? So it's 2 to the 1. If this is all 2 to the 1, 2 to the 1 is equal to 2, isn't it? Therefore, the answer is 9. I know some of you thought it was 10. I get it. Because you're thinking when you put in a 10 here, that you'll have a 2 for the power. But then it would be 2 to the 2. It'd be 2 to the second power if we did this. And 2 to the second power is not 2. The answer was 9, not 10. Settled the disputes. Yes? You do subtract them. Yes? So this would equal to, when you subtract these two, yes, 10 minus 8 is 2. But then the answer is 2 to the 2. Okay, I see what you're saying. I get what you're saying. If you want to do this a different way, and you're saying that we would subtract that minus that, I can't argue with that. That's right. So then this would be 2 to the power of x minus 8 is equal to 2. I would agree with that. But then, would you agree that the 2 has to have a power of 1 on it? All right, and then, since the bases are, it's like the bases cancel, your equation's x minus 8 equals 1. I really like this way of doing it. That's a really smart way to do it. I like it. And then I'm going to add 8 to both sides. X equals 9. It still comes out to 9, though. All right. That was a good way to do it. Okay. Let's start your homework together, because this is about as far as I needed you to get before we start the homework. So everybody find the homework for today. I'm assigning only the evens again. But before we do that, we're going to grade last night's. Because I had the feeling some of you skipped last night's, and I want to make you pay the price. So right now, would you take out your homework that was due today? I'm going to pause for a second while we grade it.